But the goal was never to turn this into a business or a YouTube channel or anything like that. The goal is to be a Fortune 500 executive. But what ended up happening right before I ended my university life is a lot of the...
Oh, what is up? This is Christian D. Evans, host of Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. And I just want to share with you real quick, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. It really means a lot to us, but also our community. And, if you like this, please share this with your friend, your family, a colleague, someone that you don't even like. Definitely share that with them. And then also leave a comment and a review for us. We really do appreciate that. And show our guests some love if you find that this episode really resonates with you. Secondly, also want to share with you some really awesome news. I've had the Fortune Opportunity Network and have incredible guests, 8 and 9 figure entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders on our podcast. And what we've done is we've actually been able to open up a Be Uncommon If You Can Mastermind, where we're able to open up the door for so many of you, right? Those that are 6-figure, 7-figure entrepreneurs that are scaling, that are struggling, that really want to level up their game, their business, their life, whatever it is. I'm able to open up that door for you with this Be Uncommon If You Can Mastermind. Now, we're only taking a select few of individuals. So what you'll need to do is go to christiandievans.com/mastermind-now. And the link is actually in the description as well. Guys, that is christiandievans.com/mastermind-now. We're only opening this up for a select few of individuals that really want to level up their game. You have a conversation with me, see if you qualify. And guys, enjoy the episode. And remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.
Most people don't even have communication goals to start with. And the best way to get rid of fear and insecurity is direction. When you know where you're going, you're not focusing on the fear you have of communication or the anxiety around it.
And see, that's what I find so interesting, because there's some of the most charismatic leaders that have an incredible public speaking voice. I know Ronald Reagan did. I know you have Martin Luther King Jr., but also you have individuals like Obama, right? That would be more slow and methodical, and and go, and all that stuff. But yet he got the point across. What I always find intriguing is let me ask you this, Brenden, what is the most impactful way to speak, or is it dependent upon obviously what you're trying to get across?
Absolutely. So I always like keeping this super simple. So what's kind of level 1 of this? How do we get started with this and speak more impactfully? So let's start with the framework that I call puzzle. So puzzle, like jigsaw puzzles, those things we used to play as kids. So let's say I ask you, Christian, it's a super easy question, don't worry. So let's say you're working on a jigsaw puzzle yourself. Which pieces would you start with first and why?
I would start with the corners, as well as the outside, the flat pieces, because those are easiest to find.
Right. I completely agree with you. Right. They're easiest to find. You're kind of like, phew, got it right. Just kidding. Right. They're easier to find. And then we work our way towards the middle. Right. But here's the thing. We don't do that in public speaking. Because when we're preparing a presentation, we do the opposite. We start with the middle first. We shove a bunch of stuff in our presentations. Whether you're a business owner who's pitching your product or service, or you're a business owner who's getting ready for a keynote at a conference, or you're an entrepreneur who's figuring out your sales script in one-on-one sales calls, it's always the same thing. Let's put a bunch of stuff there. And then the presentation sounds something like this. You roll through the entire thing. And then the closing, so thanks. And that's probably the biggest mistake. So to answer your question, Christian, how do we speak more impactfully? What's the easiest thing that we can do is implement puzzle. Start with the edges first. Practice your introduction 50 times, not 2 times, not 3 times. Do it 50 times. 50 seems like a big number, but it really isn't, because your introduction is like a minute or 2. Same thing with the conclusion. What's a great movie with the terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie, right? So 50 times the close. And what you'll realize after just like an hour and a half of practice, wait a second, I've just given my introduction, my conclusion 50 times. This sounds way better. This is the best introduction, the best close that I've ever did in my life. Now let me tackle the middle. But here's the last punchline. Who does 1,000-piece puzzles on their own? Last time I checked, nobody, right? So do it with the team. You don't necessarily need a coach if you're not. But the goal was never to turn this into a business or a YouTube channel or anything like that. The goal is to be a Fortune 500 executive. But what ended up happening right before I ended my university life is a lot of the people I was coaching in university kept asking me a question that I didn't have the answer to. And the question was, how did you learn how to speak? Brenden, how did you learn it? You didn't have a coach. You didn't do Toastmasters. How did you do it? And I kind of just said, like I just practice, and I got it. But they would always reply with, but did you like listen to YouTube videos? And that's when I stopped and I thought, who watches YouTube videos on public speaking? So a few days before I started working at IBM, this is many years ago, like 2.5 years ago, I just started watching all of the YouTube videos on the topic. And I was horrified by what I was hearing. All the advice was so general, like, Christian, you should like be yourself and get up on a stage. So I got so fed up with it that I started making videos in my basement, which ended up turning into what it is today.
That is remarkable, man. And to see that trajectory, and tell me a little bit, obviously, the impact that you've been able to help, and tell me a little bit of some of the stories that some of the top executives that you've been able to help because, maybe clarifying that message or being able to just dial in their tonality or their monotone, whatever it is. Just tell me a little bit about, how you've been able to make an impact because of the struggle that you went through and to working with other entrepreneurs now.
Absolutely. And the advice I always share on this, Christian, because, even if a lot of your audience is very successful already, there's always an angle about our lives that we have some insecurity around. So even if we're really good in our businesses, there might be another area like our health, like something else where you go, I'm not really comfortable in this area. How do I get better? And myself included, by the way. So the advice I always share on this is always start with the people you're comfortable serving. So for me, when I started MasterTalk, I probably started coaching C-suite when I was around 22, 23. But of course, you can imagine that sounds cool, but it really wasn't at the beginning because I was coaching individuals who had worked in their organizations longer than I was alive. So there's a lot of insecurity there. So what pushed me to do it? Well, what pushed me, Christian, was realizing the following. Wait a second. I was making the YouTube videos for the 15-year-old girl or boy who couldn't afford me. So I started coaching them. And then I moved up to people my own age, and then I moved up to people who were my age, and then after it was seniors and managers and directors and vice presidents, and now it's entrepreneurs and CEOs. But I think the message here is, yes, definitely been fortunate to have worked with some credible people, but I think the message for people is just focus on the people that you're starting with, and then eventually as you gain competence, this is where the confidence comes from. But the real problem with most people is they don't make the decision to start in any skill that they're uncomfortable with, and that's how we build experiences over time.
Yeah.
And I call this public speaking identity, so otherwise known as PSI, so public speaking identity, which is as you're studying different speakers, Christian, what you'll eventually realize is some speakers resonate more with you than others. And this is normal because all of us is different. So I'll give you a quick example. It's super simple. My goal sheet will be completely different from yours because the three speakers, even if I've studied many more than three, I would say the three that I model my style after the most are Seth Godin, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Lewis Howes. Those are the top three that I model. So let me explain that really quickly so people have a tangible example. So Seth Godin is because the guy's an exceptional communicator, but he's a very thoughtful person. So he doesn't just go, okay, Chris, yeah, I have a goal sheet and that's it. He goes as many inches as necessary. He's like, let me keep pushing that thought leadership and add a lot more granularity to how I'm sharing an idea. And every time I listen to his podcast, I'm always like, wow, this guy goes like 20 inches deep, especially in his area of expertise, which is marketing and branding, of course. The other piece is Gary Vaynerchuk. What I loved about Gary Vaynerchuk's communication style, he's a very aggressive to the point kind of guy, which is very similar to me. I'm a bit more tame because I can switch tones since I'm the speaking expert, I guess. But the other piece of that is his ability to share something so complicated in such a succinct way that it resonates not just for the 7-figure entrepreneur who's 40 years old or 30 years old, but also to the 6-year-old who's watching his TikTok. And that's very mind-blowing, is the level of relatability that he has in his communication style. So it's a constant reminder for me that when I'm sharing an idea on a podcast, I always want to make sure, boom, it hits the bullseye every single time. And if it doesn't hit the bullseye, I need to be accountable to that and say, what did I miss here? Why is Christian asking me too many questions about one specific topic? It must mean that Brenden missed the ball on something. Versus if Christian says, hey, that was money, let's go to the next topic, that means I'm doing the right thing. I got the right answer. And the third person that I modeled my speaking career after is Lewis Howes, because he has a very soft tone when he communicates. So whenever he's speaking to the younger generation, people have a lot more insecurity. People are getting started with their journey and they're afraid to start that business. He speaks in a way where you go, wow, if Lewis could do it, I could definitely do it too. And Lewis was very important for me at the beginning of my journey, where I didn't feel I had the skills or the knacks or the ability to be the person I am today. So there's something I took away from all those three speakers. But I think the bottom line is just the fact that you're thinking about this gives you an advantage that 99% of your industry doesn't have, which is a clear direction for your communication goals. So even if it's not perfect as you're getting started with this sheet, so the way that I think about this, especially in the lens of an entrepreneur, is let's say a prospect comes out, let's say you have a high ticket coaching business, super simple example, and they're considering you and two other prospects. Pretty simple example. Let's assume all three of you can do the job, all three of you have the same skill set. So how do we make the decision? Yeah, price is one of those factors. But for someone who's a very highly qualified prospect, price is not really the issue. It's really how good can I get the result and how much do I trust the person on the other side of the line? And here's the one thing I really want entrepreneurs to stick, and this is true if you're an executive too, is if you communicate 20% better, not 200%, not fun, just 20% better, just a bit better than everyone else, you stand out 100% of the time. And let me repeat that again. If you communicate just 20% better than every other every other competitor you're up against, you stand out 100% of the time. And this is why communication is so important, not just in the context of the people you sell services to, but to every stakeholder, to investors that you're trying to raise capital from, to customers that we talked about just now, to employees, because as you're scaling, especially into the 8, multiple 7, 8, now you're hiring a lot of people and you're inspiring them so that you can replace yourself out of the business. So in that situation too, you're not just telling them, hey, Christian, you should be doing this, or John, you should be doing this. No, you're inspiring them to actually take action on the vision that you have. And if somebody else in the same industry as you is just communicating 20% better, they're going to convince that high tier executive, that high tier employee 100% of the time to join that person's company instead of yours. So it's also about attracting the best and the brightest. So yes, communication is the catalyst for everything that you do. So it's important to oil that engine so that you can set yourself up for success at later stages of the business that you're building.
Wow, that is really remarkable, because just like you said, it is extremely imperative, because if you do not have that communication skill and ability to be very clear on what you want to communicate, there are the expectations and misunderstanding, and you may lose revenue, you may lose team members because of that misunderstanding, unless you're able to have a good inspiration and impact and influence in these people. Now, let me ask you as well, because of course what I'm always intrigued with just like you were saying just earlier is mimicking, right? Analyzing other people and their speaking behavior. How do you identify, where I am Christian D. Evans, Tony Robbins is Tony Robbins, and I can mimic some of the things that he has, but also how do I become independent and have my own speaking patterns or habits and make it very organic for myself? What would you say to those people?
Great question. Sorry. So what I would say, Christian, is all these entrepreneurs, all these successful people have goals, right? We all have maybe career goals, financial goals, health goals, right? It makes sense. But how many of us have communication goals? I would say 99% of the people I've met, worked or not worked with, no communication goals. Or if they do have goals, it's generally very vague. Like, hey, I want to start a podcast or speak on a stage. I go, well, if we don't have the target in mind, then what will happen is we don't prioritize that. And when we don't prioritize something, especially when we have a successful business, it falls to the wayside. Why would I work on my communication skills if I'm about to jump on a sales call and sell a $10,000 product? Well, I don't have time for this communication thing. Who cares about that? That's where the problem lies, Christian. So the first thing that we need to figure out is having a clear set of communication goals. But the challenge behind that is the reason most people struggle with building that is because, wait a second, what does being a great communicator even mean? Does it mean that you saying less filler words? Does it mean, to your point, that our vocal variety is a bit better? And that's the challenge, is every great speaker has a different style. Tony Robbins is very different than Brene Brown, who's very different than Seth Godin. So how do we do this? The way you do this, and feel free to write this down, implement it, because I hate just giving information. Be sure you're actually taking action on this, is pick 3 speakers that you personally admire. These could be thought leaders, coaches, people in your own industry where you say, wow, this person is an exceptional communicator. Write that person down on a piece of paper. And then what you want to do is point out one strength that you feel they have as a speaker and one weakness. And the reason we write one weakness is to humanize that individual. To say, well, this person has a gap in their game, so we can become more like them. And then the last piece of that is studying the individual speaker one at a time. So let's say Tony Robbins is one of the people on your goal sheet. I call this a communication goal sheet. You don't want to just watch his keynotes. You want to watch his keynotes with a different set of contact lenses. Because most of the time when you watch somebody like Tony, as an example, you're looking at what is the content that he's sharing. What can I actually learn from Tony? You're taking notes on that content. But what I would challenge you to do differently for 30 minutes a week, nothing too crazy, is look at them and say, how are they speaking? And just pay attention to the way that they're communicating. And that's how I got really good at communication really fast, where I would mimic them literally in my basement as they were speaking eventually, and then I copied their technique and then built my own version of it.
Wow, that's incredible. And I love what you said, because that's so actionable steps, very small and minuscule, but also just so very actionable. And so let me ask you as well, for those that, like you said just earlier, that those that don't think, oh, you know what, I don't really need to focus on public speaking. I need to focus on sales. I need to focus on this. But